In
1982, a 15-year-old boy walked into a luxury car dealership in the suburbs of Detroit. Without flinching, he pointed at a black Mercedes-Benz 500 SEL and said, "I'll take it." He paid $62,000 in cash from a brown paper bag. That wasn't a scene from a movie. It was reality. And it wasn't the exception. In the housing projects of Detroit, kids were pulling in thousands of dollars a week. Teenagers cruised in Corvettes, wore gold chains, took trips to Vegas, all financed by heroin. At the heart of it all was Young Boys Incorporated, YBI, one of the most structured and terrifying drug enterprises in American history. Founded and run by young black men, YBI revolutionized street-level drug dealing. Their secret? Children. Dozens. Hundreds. Underage boys who couldn't be charged as adults, dealing dope for bosses they saw as heroes. This is the story of Young Boys Incorporated, a gang that ran like a business, sold poison on the streets, and left blood in its wake. Detroit, once the epicenter of American industrial might, had become a city of contradictions. Factories still smoked, Cadillacs still rolled out of assembly lines, but on the ground, poverty crept through neighborhoods, buildings decayed, schools closed, and children found themselves at the mercy of the streets. That's where YBI stepped in. Where society saw lost boys, YBI saw opportunity, raw talent, disposable labor, and a way to mask a growing empire behind innocent faces.
In the mid-1970s, Detroit was hemorrhaging jobs. The auto industry was in decline. Neighborhoods on the city's west side were turning into war zones. Families struggled. Kids had no prospects, no hope. From the playgrounds of Burney Elementary School, a few teenage friends started hatching a plan. Among them, Dwayne "Wonderful" Wayne Davis, Bernard "Boneman" Boykins, Reginald "Nut" Chestnut, and Charles "Choicey" Chuck Lindsay. They began selling small quantities of heroin in the Dexter-Davison area. Their early business was low-tech, chaotic, and risky, standing on corners, dodging police, stashing product in alleyways. But they had two advantages: loyalty and ambition. The crew expanded, and by 1977, they were making enough money to get noticed. That's when Raymond "Baby Ray" Peoples and Milton "Butch" Jones entered the picture. Raymond brought a reputation, street-earned, fearsome. He knew everyone. He could command a room with a stare. Butch Jones was something else: cold, calculated, smart. Fresh out of prison for a manslaughter charge he caught at just 17, Butch brought organization to the chaos. He saw what they had built and turned it into something bigger. He turned it into Young Boys Incorporated. Their model was simple: get the drugs, cut it, bag it, sell it. But Jones innovated. He standardized product, established brand names, introduced hierarchy. And most important, he recruited kids, not teenagers, kids, 10, 11, 12. "Cops won't arrest a baby," he allegedly said, "and if they do, they're out in hours." Soon the streets weren't run by dope fiends and gangbangers. They were ruled by middle schoolers in brand new Nikes. Federal authorities would later call it one of the most organized drug enterprises they'd ever seen. And in time, the organization's very name would become a synonym for fear.
Young Boys Inc. operated like a Fortune 500 company. It had structure, chain of command, even product branding. They sold heroin in stamped packets with names like Rolls-Royce, Murder One, TV, and P-Funk Raw Dog. At the top were the founders: Davis, Jones, Peoples, Marshall. Each ran crews but reported to a central authority. Weekly meetings were held, disputes were arbitrated, rules were enforced. Below them, lieutenants ran zones across Detroit. The city was carved into sectors like a war map. Each crew had a top dog responsible for that turf. Below that were the runners. And at the bottom, kids. Hundreds of them. They used special drop spots, coded messages, even walkie-talkies to relay updates. Some kids wore colored shoelaces or hats turned sideways to signal which crew they repped. "It was like FedEx," said one retired detective. "Efficient, fast, anonymous." YBI leaders knew to keep the kids loyal, so every Sunday they paid out. In basements and hotel suites, cash was stacked on tables. Bonuses were given, prizes handed out. A Corvette, a gold rope chain, a trip to Cedar Point. One mother, interviewed by the Detroit Free Press, said, "They gave my son more money than I made in 3 months, and they gave it with a smile." But it wasn't just local. They shipped heroin in taxicabs, had mules fly to Miami. They used business fronts like car washes, bakeries, and even a community center. Every dollar was washed, pressed, and deposited into real estate. "They weren't gangsters, they were entrepreneurs," said an FBI agent who worked the case. "The scariest kind."
Being in YB, I meant instant status. Teenagers flaunted Max Julien jackets, gold watches, and fresh cars. The jackets, fur-lined and flashy, became so linked to the gang that kids were being shot for them. In one chilling incident, a 15-year-old honor student, Kevin Davis, was shot in his school hallway after handing over his Max Julien jacket to a trio of robbers. His mother later said, "It was senseless. I always told him, if they want it, just give it to them." The coat cost $135. Kevin was shot in the stomach. He lived, but the bullet was never removed. "He never wore anything flashy again," his mother said. Inside the gang, loyalty was enforced with violence. Butch Jones created what insiders called the wrecking crew. If you stole, lied, snitched, they came for you. Sometimes it was a beating, sometimes it was a bullet. Their reputation grew so fierce that rivals folded without a fight. A teenager who tried to form his own crew disappeared. His body was never found. YBI had rules, though, you couldn't use. Heroin was for customers. Runners had to stay sharp. If you got sloppy, you got dropped. One ex-member said in a court affidavit, "You didn't see us nodding off. We were too busy counting money."
By 1981, YBI controlled nearly 80% of Detroit's heroin trade. They were bringing in an estimated $350,000 to $500,000 a day. Some estimates went as high as $1 million. But power attracts enemies. Smaller crews like the Curry Brothers and Pony Down wanted turf. Independent dealers were squeezed out. Some paid tribute. Others were eliminated. Violence exploded. In September 1982, Dwayne Davis was gunned down in broad daylight. Police suspected it was an inside job. One lieutenant said anonymously, "Wayne got too flashy." Butch didn't like that. There were car bombs, drive-bys, schoolyard shootouts. "It wasn't just business," said Detective Carl Taylor. "It was a civil war, and the battlefield was the block." Community leaders held vigils. Pastors demanded answers. Police were outgunned and outnumbered. Parents begged their children to stay inside. But when your son could make $500 a day at age 13, the pull was too strong.
In 1980, the DEA, FBI, and Detroit Police launched a multi-agency task force. 2 years of surveillance, informants, undercover buys, wiretaps. In December 1982, the hammer dropped. 41 indictments, 18 arrests in a single sweep, $1.3 million in cash, dozens of weapons, files, ledger books, branded heroin packets. Sylvester Seal Murray was arrested first. A major supplier, he had ties to Thai cartels. He was held on $10 million bond. Butch Jones disappeared. For days, he was a ghost. Then they found him hiding in a Royal Oak townhouse under a fake name. U.S. Attorney Leonard Gilman said, "We got the guts of Young Boys Inc., not the kids, the leadership." Court proceedings stretched for years. Prosecutors laid out a case of conspiracy, racketeering, tax fraud, and murder. Jones was found guilty of operating a continuing criminal enterprise. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. He served 12, got out, and returned to crime. In 2008, he was indicted again for murder, drug trafficking, and conspiracy. "I didn't pull the trigger," Jones reportedly told the judge, "but I knew what would happen, and I let it happen."
The fall of YBI didn't end drug crime in Detroit. It professionalized it. Crews like Pony Down, the Chambers Brothers, and Best Friends adopted YBI's playbook. Corporate structure, youth runners, branded product. But by then, heroin was being replaced by crack cocaine. The 1980s crack epidemic would dwarf everything YBI had built. Still, their legacy lingered. Police departments began adapting. Prosecutors lobbied to try juveniles as adults. Schools installed metal detectors. Drug forfeiture laws were born. YBI had altered the system. For some, they became legends. In barbershops and basements, stories were told. "They were the first," one former gang member said. "Before BMF, before Curry. There was YBI."
Milton "Butch" Jones is currently serving a federal sentence. After being released in the 90s, he returned to drug trafficking. In 2008, he was sentenced again, this time for conspiracy to commit murder. He has filed for compassionate release, citing health issues. His petitions have so far been denied. Raymond "Baby" Ray Peoples was murdered in 1985, shot in his car outside a club. The case remains unsolved. Dwayne "Wonderful" Wayne Davis was killed in 1982. Police suspect it was internal retaliation. Sylvester "Seal" Murray disappeared from the spotlight after his release. Darryl Terrell, once a YBI member, was arrested again in 2017. Prosecutors say he ran a cocaine ring out of a fake soul food restaurant called Cafe Sunshine. Some YBI kids went on to live normal lives, others didn't make it out. A few became preachers, others became addicts.
Young Boys Incorporated was more than a gang. It was a mirror. It showed us what happens when children are abandoned by the system and adopted by the streets. It taught law enforcement new tactics. It reshaped juvenile justice. It changed Detroit. But it also left scars, because for every dollar they made, someone's child overdosed. For every gold chain, a family mourned. For every rise, there was a fall. They ran their streets like CEOs, paid their workers like kings, enforced their rules with blood. And though they are gone, their story endures. This was the rise and fall of Young Boys Incorporated, Detroit's child-run cartel, a legacy of ambition, destruction, and loss, and a warning for what happens when society looks the other way.